run through an update on the integrated transport strategy.
Thank you very much.
I'm
See, I'm even happy it's black and white.
I didn't do that, so I can't take back.
it's, I think
We had a councillor that was all about colour and how much it costs. You remember? Mary?
we've got a hard stop.
Mary, she'd complain. Yeah.
So we've got 20 minutes.
Okay.
So, let's head for you. Speed, everybody speed.
The whistle stop tour.
We'll stop tour through where we're at. It's really strategy. And so we'll lead through that. So we'll just crack into it and probably take questions at the end, maybe just to allow us to get through and be out of your way for whatever you've got at 11:30. That's okay.
So hopefully most of you remember that on the 4th of March this year, the City Planning, Infrastructure and Environment Committee approved the draft strategy for engagement. That engagement took place from the 28th of April to the 27th of May. And there was a high level of response that we received. So just in terms of the summary of engagement, it's happened over 2 phases. So the first was in June 2023, and then the strategy took a little bit of a break and popped back up again last year. And so the second, as I said, took place from April to May last year. There were 700 responses over the 2 rounds of engagement, which I was pretty happy about. The original engagement was quite high level, so it looked at the high level vision, outcomes, sort of challenges, and what we're going to do about those challenges. The second round was sort of more detailed, and that was on the full draft, as I don't remember. And the feedback from that has helped to shape where the final strategy is. Let's just get some quick stats on that engagement processes that we undertook. So there's 207 quick poll responses in the second round on the draft strategy, 429 survey submissions, and over 2,000 visits to the webpage. 72% of respondents were supportive of the direction, strongly supportive of the direction that the strategy was taking. But it did identify some concerns, including congestion, public transport issues, parking and safety, and they also wanted to see investment priorities being sort of on roads, resilience and safer streets. Interestingly, on the quick poll, 67% of people said that they would change their travel mode if better options existed, which I think sort of points to some opportunities in terms of travel choice. So we've touched on some of these before, so that's around road safety. That's sort of the key themes, I guess, from the feedback. People wanted to see better public transport frequency, reliability and coverage, safer walking and cycling facilities. Growth was matched by infrastructure, more consideration of the rural communities and the accessibility issues they have, and just to make sure that the strategy was sort of written in plain English. You look like you want to answer.
Just a real question on what do they mean by growth must be matched by the infrastructure?
So I think they were basically saying that we've got a lot of growth, but our infrastructure hasn't necessarily kept pace with it. So like there's congestion, that things like that. So basically, it's just they don't feel that infrastructure is supportive of the level of growth that we've been experiencing.
You've been called up in the queue off the jet road trying to get.
No, it's fair. And like, do you drive from the parking lot at 8:30 in the morning, but they want a great big fast thoroughfare down the centre. Is it like, you know what I mean? Like, what is it?
Not looking at the feedback. So the feedback was they want better cycling and walking facilities and more choice.
Right.
Some of them have talked about congestion on state highway, which obviously is outside of the remit of council, but I can come on to what we might be doing about some of that stuff shortly.
Okay, I'll wait till shortly because I'm actually wanted to add on to what Councillor Kerry said, because when we do the growth and do our consenting with, Mayborn and the various other places, there is a transport component to that conversation, but it doesn't seem to actually go further than that, like the impact further around from that subdivision, which is what I think you're getting at.
Well, as an example.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of one of the strategic responses that we've got at the end, hopefully kind of points to what that will do. So look, I've just done a couple of slides here just in terms of how the feedback's helped to shape the strategy. So we had some feedback on the original vision was a word salad and uninspiring. So we've rewritten the vision to make it a bit more bit shorter and have a bit of a clearer focus. Safety was a big issue that people wanted to see, so we moved that front of the vision. We've done a glossary of terms because there's some terms that we just can't get away from. So we've done a glossary of terms just to help with the understanding of the strategy. We've aligned it better with some of the other strategies across council. We've acknowledged that rural issues were probably not very well incorporated into the original challenges and outcomes. So we've done that. And we've created a new outcome, which is easy access for everyone. And we've replaced the focus areas. So previously we'd gone out with sort of focus areas in the first round of consultation. We replaced those with strategic objectives. So there's some things that we can't do. So some of the feedback talked about the fact that there's no parking requirements in the district plan anymore, and that's something that we don't have any control over because that's come from central government. So we've addressed that through the council report to make sure that there was a round back on that consultation so that people didn't think that we had ignored that. There was some feedback in terms of public transport services, which again, we don't have the remit to deal with. So we'll pass feedback to Metlink, and similarly stuff on state.
Central government wind back though on their parking issues that needed to be
I think they've
provided.
talked about it, but I don't think that's actually followed through yet,
Okay.
is my understanding. So there's been some conversation in the press around that, but I don't think that that's actually followed through.
Okay.
Look, I won't repeat this slide really. This is stuff that we've talked about in previous presentations to council. It's just what, why is an integrated transport strategy necessary? And just wanted to say, look, that provides the 30-year framework for how transport will support growing Upper Hutt. But I think it's clear to say that it's not an implementation plan. That will come next. So this is the high level sort of strategic direction, and then that will be followed through by an implementation plan. So just in terms of where the strategy's now landed, we've obviously identified what our current transport picture looks like, and that's the fact that we've got a state highway network that also acts as a bit of a local road. It's not just into and out of Upper Hutt. There's travel between within Upper Hutt Union State Highway 2 as well. It's on the side of Upper Hutt, should I say? So we had to recognise that and the relationship and the advocacy role that the strategy will have with NZTA. Similarly, there's the advocacy role that it needs to play from a public transport perspective as well. So that's just some information that's kind of presented up front in the transport strategy around what our current network looks like. We've talked about demand for park and ride before exceeding capacity, and that's been an issue. Walking and cycling rates are actually lower in Upper Hutt than the national average. We've got issues around sort of limited east-west connections, both across State Highway 2 and then out towards Porirua. And travel demand is obviously expected to continue to grow as the city grows. So again, look, I've just talked about some of those, so I won't repeat them. Obviously, other issues that we haven't picked up as a net hazard issue that we have to address as part of our thinking as well. And we've got a limited funding pot that we have to try and prioritise. On the right hand side there, you'll just see that what the new challenges are. They're slightly different to what was in the draft.
So do these connect to what we're already doing under transport?
These
in our great year.
Yeah, so this basically sets this is the current situation. These are the current challenges that we're dealing with.
You would have to address some of them in the program of work that we've got in our LTP is my question.
Yeah. So some of them will be addressed by what's in our current.
And we'll know which ones they are when we come to make decisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the idea is that when we develop the implementation plan, that should always look back to what the strategic direction set in the strategy.
And tied to the funding too that we've already.
and type of the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like I said, part of this is to be used as an advocacy document to try and get funding from other places, and I'll come on to some of that later. I've got a bit of an example.
That's what we've been doing, that right, as part of the LTP, so this will help that and bids the NZTA and transport plan, regional and transport plans and things like that. So that's the idea.
Right.
Helps to set those priorities and say this is what council wants us to do, these are our programs. Some will be funded, some won't be. We'll try to advocate for that funding using the strategy as the lever to do that. So this is the strategic direction we want to go. This is the funding to do that. Whether that's successful or not, but at least it's got a strategic and an endorsed by the community and council process to say this is what we've been charged to do. So we can go into those debates
Okay.
fully aware and fully armed with those arguments.
So now with this, next we've got the vision and outcome on here. Look, I won't read through the slide because that would be slightly painful. But what we've done is actually to streamline those outcomes following feedback that we've received. These are quite similar to what was originally engaged on last year, and the reason that that's the case is because there was quite a high level of support for them both in the original consultation engagement exercise we did and on the second round that we did in April. So been keen to kind of keep them as close as possible to that because there was strong support, except that what I've tried to do is to actually have a bit of a thread. So here's our challenges. This is the outcomes that we want to achieve that relate to those challenges, and in the strategic responses, this is how we're going to do it. So there's a thread then through that document. So that the hope is that through the final strategy that you'll see coming up on the City Planning, Infrastructure and Environment Committee meeting on the 19th of August is a thread that kind of connects these parts of the strategy together.
On the slide, there's connected and resilient. I think those two certainly stand out to me as being very high priority. Certainly, like we've got our roads and our rail and the river trail as well, all running parallel through the valley. But it's the
east-west connection.
east-west,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
connecting
Yeah.
activity there.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
I mean, I could cycle over the hill and jump on a train, you know.
Yeah,
If I had an electric bike, I probably would.
yeah.
But the point is that just having that connectivity to come across the city.
Absolutely. And some of those numbers, particularly that east-west connection, but other gaps in the network have been identified.
Can I just ask a question? You said that this is going to come back to us in August, right?
19th of August.
Yeah, the 19th of August. So this is going to be the strategy that we adopt.
Yeah.
That is then going to have an impact on decisions that we make in the LTP. I just want to. Well, that's what I was thinking. I was just thinking we're going to be accepting something that we don't know what the financial position or implication is going to be. And for me, we're making a decision that then hurts us into an outcome for the LTP. Is that correct or not? I just think that's back to front. I have to agree with Councillor McLeod there. I'm concerned of what you're going to ask us to do.
Well, so in terms of the strategy itself, like I said, it's not an implementation plan. So it doesn't say we're going to do this project at this time. That's absolutely not what this strategy does. It just says that this is what we want.
But if we don't have these guiding principles to allow us to go and develop up projects, what we bring to the table?
Yeah, but I still think that there should be a timeline or something around, you know, the vision and the outcomes that you're going to be presenting to us on the 19th. My concern is that however the paper is couched, and I don't know how the paper is going to be couched because we haven't seen it, and you maybe have not done it up, I don't know. But, you know, when I look through this and your strategic responses 1 through to 7, is it 7, I think, is going to be almost funneling us or putting us in a silo or a railway track of decisions that we then have to make when it comes to the LTP, which then goes to NZTA, because NZTA, they've already landed their program of work, right? Their matrix, or they were out consulting.
Well, their investment
Yeah,
methodology.
exactly. So that's been done. So all of this will be aligned to that.
So the idea behind this is that it does align with the NLTP and the RLTP processes. And so we've had feedback from both Greater Wellington Regional Council and NZTA on the draft strategy, and they were both comfortable that it's aligning with their processes. There's some feedback from Greater Wellington Regional Council on specifics, which I've included and I've addressed through that. But I think we have to remember this is a 30-year document, right? And that the idea behind the way that it's been written is that it provides flexibility. So as our priorities change from a central government level, we don't have to constantly shift the strategic direction through the document. So it provides us with that flexibility to be able to.
It's to me
align
really
with that.
flexible. Yes. I mean, I think it's a great document, and I've only just seen it this morning, so I'm just quickly reading through it as you were speaking, and I think it's some quite good stuff. But our LTP might take a different tack, and then all of a sudden, this integrated transport strategy doesn't align with everything in the LTP. So the LTP should be the driving light for anything, right? Because that's the top strategy. The others come underneath it.
So the LTP will be the delivery vehicle for the strategic, the projects that drop out of the strategy fund. So you're setting the strategic direction here for what you want your transport network to look like into the future, and then we can go away and build the projects that deliver that.
Sure, but
And we go away for funding to get there.
yeah, sure. Except we haven't had the discussion about what we want that to look like in 7 years' time.
Okay, but we've had 2 cracks at the strategy, and it's gone out to the community. And
Yes,
we've had 3 or 4 workshops, and
Yes.
I think it was developed before I turned up here.
yes.
So I think council's engaged in the strategy, and the community's engaged in giving feedback in the strategy over 4 years.
Yes, and I asked the same question when this came across the desk when I first got back here.
So
Like,
I
how
guess,
does this affect the LTP? And so what you're saying is this strategy will drive some of the decisions in the LTP.
so we'll drive some of the projects that are put forward into the LTP, because what we have in the LTP at the moment, for example, is renewal of the Tocha Park Bridge. It's not funded by anybody. It doesn't sit in the NLTP, the RLTP. It's not an NZTA's program, and I can't do it. So there's no lever for me to go and have a debate with NZTA or the regional council or any other party to try and lever some third-party funding or a contribution to that, because it doesn't sit in any strategic program of work apart from the LTP. So I'm hamstrung. Silverstring Bridge, exactly the same, 25 million, but no other parties endorsement of that. It's not sitting in the RLTP. It's not in the 30-year infrastructure. It's not city councils. LTP, so because there's no space for them to look out to hook in. So that's what we need. We need that document that allows us to go and have those engagements, get them into national and regional planning processes, and other councils for the Silverstring, for example, and to advocate through that process. With the Alphas, you can have an LTP, but it is only well, in the best case scenario for Silverstring Bridge is probably 10% to 15% of the value of the project.
So when this was first across, because I wasn't on council when this first came, why was it not followed through? Why was this integrated transport strategy not continued? Why was it
There was
discontinued?
500k that was put in the LTP for an integrated strategy, and we started it, which gave the framework or the base of the framework that has been consulted on, right? Then when we went to do more planning, the priority of that dropped down and other things took over, which is what you're talking about, the reprioritisation of projects. But I thought that the Silverstring Bridge was still in our LTP.
It is, and I'll
Yeah, I was
I'll
gonna
look at that later.
Yeah, so
But it is, but it's not, it doesn't appear in the regional land transport plan. It's not on the NZTA's process, but so it means they just come in and say to us it's unfunded. It's not a funded project, so therefore
yeah, but I was under the impression, because I used to be the alternate to the land transport, the regional transport committee, was that we had 2 projects that were the last 2 projects on the regional landscape, right? Upper Hutt Council did.
Yeah.
But then they rejigged it. And I would have thought that would have been the time that our officers would have put the things up there in our LTP that come under the land transport or transport.
So they are. So just I guess in terms of what's in the LTP, we've got Silver String Bridge, we've
Yeah.
got Total Park
That's
Bridge,
right.
we've got the 2 Ferguson
Yeah.
Drive intersections. From my memory, and it's been a while since I've been on the RLTP group, that
Yeah.
all 4 of those are included. Maybe not Total Park,
No,
Silver String
Total-
and the 2
Yeah.
Ferguson Drives are
Ah.
included in the RLTP. However, they're not
High in the priority.
high in the project. And
That's right.
and in some respect, the priority of the RLTP doesn't matter so much from an NLTP perspective. It kind of kicks in if we've got exactly the same scheme as Lower Hutt
Yeah.
and we're both asking for the same
It's
money,
weighted.
then there's a weighted and
Yeah.
actually Upper Hutt's is higher priority, whatever, so we will get the money. So it's not in the NLTP,
No.
so we don't have any funding through that process.
Yeah.
And so this, by including it in the strategy, is a way of saying, you know, we want to make sure that we've got sufficient funding to do what we want to do, and there isn't sufficient funding in the LTP at the moment to be able to deliver that bridge.
And if we don't get the funding, it still stays in the LTP,
It can still stay in the LTP.
which is
If that's
what's
the decision that
happening
you
now.
want.
And there's no reason, the
Yeah.
way it is at the moment, why our representatives on that committee can't keep pushing that it goes.
Absolutely not, and there's nothing,
We
there's
don't need
nothing,
a strategy.
no, so what,
Well, the strategies used when we go into conversations as staff across the board with NZTA
Yeah.
officers and everybody else, and regional council officers, to be able to say, this is what our community's after, these are the strategic issues you've submitted and agreed with them. This is how we need to work collaboratively to deliver these. I mean, this is the piece of, this is the strategy that allows us to be able to do the planning, to bring the projects put in front of council for the LTP. Without all that, there's just a randomness about it, without the strategic direction of a document like this, which is why we build these things, so that we know what we're aiming to do and can have a collective understanding of that, and also have the community's input to that, which we've got through a couple of engagements with them.
So we do that with the infrastructure plan that we do, which is 30, 50 years. Why can't this go into that?
So feed into that as well. Give direction to feed into the infrastructure plan.
that's the plan.
Yeah. I'm just keen to look, how have we got to here? And this is the question we're having, because I thought it was pretty clear the whole way. Like, I guess I can definitely see the value and importance of having it, even just to enable some of the operation decisions underneath that might not even come to our level, right? So just how does the city flow? That is key. Whereas at the moment, all of our LT projects just seem like, you know, I've had an idea, X person has had an idea, you know, we've just plonked stuff in there, and we can all probably agree the Silver String Bridge is a crunchy choke point that needs to be resolved, but there's probably just so much else, you know, like other roundabouts and fixing that area, is that a priority? Or if we looked at the strategy, to other stuff that can be done, you know, like
I get it. And-
we're not
and
being
I've
guided.
I've asked a couple of times and not really had an answer, because if it was, I don't know, was part of a $500,000, or this was going to cost $500,000, and it just popped up again, and I think it's really important that we find out what our community wants around transport and what an integrated transport strategy looks like. Keen to see what the rural community have added to it, but I just find what I'm trying to understand, I've kind of missed something along the way around our direction coming from us at a governance level around the LTP, and having a strategy that's kind of feeding into it, but we actually haven't yet decided on what Upper Hutt wants to look like, what we want Upper Hutt to be like. We've had a discussion this morning about rates and around, or how the decision we make around that is going to drive what we want Upper Hutt to be and to look like. You know, it's kind of, there is some back to front stuff going on.
But is it entitled, like if I, sorry, I'm going to hijack you, but like, I think we've all got that question around what does the CBD look like? But and what are we doing, you know, in terms of revitalising that? But the transport kind of gets to the heart of it, eh? Like if we're looking at where our suburbs are, how people move, even between schools and the high schools and that, you know, like it does start to influence what does that look like terms of where do people live, how do they get where they need to be. And but I appreciate you weren't in last term, but there was quite a bit of shaping into what that looked like. And I guess now it's the public feedback. We have that shaping piece again when we get that. But
I think in terms of, just to answer a few of these kind of threads, we have to have a strategy in place, otherwise we're not eligible for some of the more specific funding from central government in terms of transport. So they have transport funding rounds that you have to show you have some strategic document to start with. So that's super important. And I guess with anything, ideally we would start from the very beginning in terms of this strategic intent, long-term plan stuff, and then feed into this. But we had the opportunity to bring this back to the work program quickly, and we have 3 years in this 3M to get stuff done. So there has to be some overlap in terms of the work projects together. So, but I think to me this aligns well with the other work we're doing on the long-term plans. And the next part of the long-term plan discussion is the asset planning, which this will be a direct kind of input into, right?
So just moving on, like I said, we've just got some strategic response, and that kind of sets out sort of effectively what we want to achieve and how we're going to achieve it. And like I said, it's not project specific, it's a strategic direction, and so the implementation plan from will flow out of that, and that will inform the infrastructure strategy. But there's nothing in here that will preclude you from continuing with the projects that I already identified in the long-term plan, if that makes sense. So that, that Ferguson Drive intersection, the Silver Stream Bridge, they're very much sort of still on the what's, and they're still on the table from that perspective. And like I said, I'll come on to Silver Stream Bridge shortly. I know that we've kind of gone over time, so I won't run through these in much detail.
On that previous slide, so firstly, like Wallaceville Estate, there was no, or there probably is now, but walkability from the estate to Ward Street to get to public transport, and things like Riverstone Terraces, walkability for the kids to get to the college, you know. And again, we've got Maymorn Farm. They're in the zone to go to Plateau School, but they can't walk there. You know what I mean? There's that lack of connectivity that's built into a new subdivision from the get-go. And that was something, so I've been here a few terms now. So, but that was something that I did raise at the time, was designing new subdivisions
in this
with
address of
connectivity from the
the
start.
operational level, because we can point to the strategy that says to developers must be connectivity, there must be. So that's the things that can happen out of this, rather than it being an officer by officer or person that's looking at it. You can look at that the same. You must have connections, must prioritise walking and cycling, you must. So that's
and going back to council swells and thing earlier, part of that will be like, this is what we'll do, how we'll do it. Part of that section says, we'll be working with developers to make sure that those connections happen at an early stage of consent processes. So that's the idea behind this, is to use that for those.
So is that being carried through from what I've previously said over the years around incorporating connectivity from the start?
So that's the hope behind this document, is to say, look, we want you to create those connections with that wider transport network, and so it allows us to have some stronger conversations with the developers.
After 6 years.
I mean,
I know that you. I know it's.
I can't speak for kind of what.
I'm just saying that it seems an awfully long time for the wheels to turn, though, doesn't it?
I think that's the beauty of having a strategic document like this with these strategic responses, is that they're embedded in the way that the organisation does things, rather than how individuals or teams do things without, in isolation.
You've got some consistency in the decision-making framework hoping to achieve as part of this process. Look, I'll go quickly through these. We've obviously got the strategic responses. The next one is improving transport choices. The next one's looking after our network. That's about resilience and maintenance operations renewals type stuff. Environmental sustainability, creating safe and healthy communities, supporting economic prosperity, and then there's investing wisely, I guess, and the advocacy piece. So the next steps are that we'll bring this to the 19th of August city planning meeting, and then from that's approved, we'll start looking at what strategic direction looks like.
For consideration in the LTP.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the quick polls question, are they going out?
No, the quick poll have gone out. This is the next stage. So
We talked about the quick polls and the engagement at the last workshop
Yeah.
on this in terms of how we're going out to talk to the community to
Yeah.
get feedback. So that's all done, and I think the next bit is quick polls on the curbside and parking management.
yeah,
So did we agree to put a whole lot of questions in there around?
no, so
paying
look,
for parking?
no, so these questions are just a test with you through the workshop today as to what are the kind of questions that you want to ask us from the quick poll. So the quick poll, we had a really good success through the transport strategy. We got 207 responses through the quick poll. So we thought it would be a nice little sort of, quick sound bites to send out to the community for shaping that curbside and parking management strategy. So these are just teaser questions, I guess, that we wanted to test with you today to see what your thoughts were. They're not set in stone. They're just to encourage some conversation, I guess.
I'm just conscious in terms of time, because we were going to move on to the next session. Is this something, is there another way that we can kind of give feedback on this, or is it just in terms of, or do people have strong views that we need to discuss, or?
I just want to say I think there's too many questions around parking.
This is about parking.
This is so
Paying for parking. Would you consider paying for it? Would you pay for a guaranteed parking space? Would you support paid parking if the revenue was used? Would you support line staying if there's a parking being paid? There's kind of like, there's a bit of an aversion for paying for parking on top. I don't think we should test that water. I think the water's been consistently tested.
So have we had data research? Have we had surveys on it before? Is that what you're saying?
My
No, I don't think
recollection,
so.
I'm not sure about having surveys
No,
on
we
it, but
haven't.
I wouldn't ask so many
It might
surveys.
be, not that we're aware of. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal stuff that's happened, and I guess Rick was part of it, trying to test it, but understand how we could get some good information. I mean, the challenges we've got, and we articulated that through that last workshop we had was, for example, our parking rights are chock-a-block full 8 a.m. in the morning, doesn't allow for people who might be doing school runs and things to come and park, and then a quick snapshot of that indicated that 50% of those vehicles are coming from 10 minutes. So, all that data is starting to give us a bit of a feel about what parking and how parking is being used. We just want to see if we can test, particularly in those park and rides, which are coming up, and if we want to encourage public transport use and things like that. But it might be a wider discussion. We have run out of time. There was a couple of slides. It was about integrated transport.
Sorry, make a big thing. School zonings in that are changing at the moment. So different school zones for different streets and bits and pieces. That's something that'll be finished hopefully in the next month. So,
Okay.
so you're aware.
That's interesting.
So and that might
We don't have
affect
to move signs, do we?
Pardon?
We don't have to move our signs.
No.
We'll just have to leave it there because we do need the last few minutes to talk about something else. So we'll have a think about how we get feedback on that and if we have to bring it to. Hey, Iman, can you just jump on the last one? Thank you.